There is hardly a day that comes by when the Congress party isn't criticizing one of its most senior leaders, in this case, Shashi Tharoor. Shashi Tharoor has now been traveling across many countries in support of the country and along with party delegation of many parties, a delegation of many parties talking about Operation Sindoor, talking about India's fight against terrorism and how, in many senses, Pakistan is the epicenter of global terrorism. But are there politics back home which really affect Shashi Tharoor within his party? Joining us now to look at this, Shopun Dasgupta. Thanks, Shopun, very much for being with us. Some would say that Shashi Tharoor has shifted his political stance somewhat towards a more nationalist position, one which perhaps some in the Congress party feel incongruous with what they've been saying or speaking of Operation Sindoor. Would you agree?
Well, Vishnu, there's no denying that Shashi has become the sort of flavor of the season in various ways. Some in a way which he would have liked it to be, and in other ways which are probably not entirely favorable to him. Now, I think the real issue which you're addressing about the hostility amongst a section of congressmen towards his participation in this delegation and the manner in which he's been very consistently supportive of the government and the national position post-Pahalgam. Now, I think one way of looking at this is that Shashi has moved towards what you call a more nationalist position. The other way of looking at it is that the Congress itself has moved quite seriously and inexplicably in a direction which goes against the very traditions of this party. Let's not forget that this was the party of the national movement. This was the party of Indira Gandhi. Nehru, no doubt, had tempered his nationalist rhetoric in various ways. But Indira Gandhi was there. Even in his own way, Rajiv Gandhi was very robust in standing up for the country and in every way. So I get this very eerily uncomfortable feeling that the Congress at times wants to resemble the left wing of the Democratic Party in the United States. That many of its social assumptions and many of the positions, a very wokish type of positions which they've been taking, are actually the outcome of American educated inheritors who now occupy certain very important positions in the party, and which is quite detached from the party's natural instincts. And I think Shashi, to a very large extent, belonging to a generation like mine, which we are inherently suspicious of that, and who've repudiated that old Vietnam tradition of the 60s, finds himself out on a limb as far as his party is concerned, but not necessarily as far as the country is concerned.
Where does he stand with the BJP? Does he have a future in the BJP?
Well, Shashi is a personal friend of mine. We grew up together in the same college and we were in the same class. And his ideological proclivities are somewhat at odds with the BJP. And he's tried to make a lot of ideological justification of why he's taken certain positions as regards Hindutva, etc., which is a little different from that of the BJP. Although the differences are not as stark as people make it out to be. Now, I would think that it would require a lot of agonizing and sort of self-justification. He would have to reinvent his entire social profile and political profile if he was to join the BJP. I hope that the BJP is large-hearted enough to include him, were he to say that, he wants to have a future in it. But I think the difficulty will be of Shashi. He comes from a certain ecosystem, and that ecosystem is not inherently or naturally inclined towards looking upon anybody in the BJP very favorably, although it's changed quite a lot. All the Babalogs of yesteryear, particularly in Uttar Pradesh, appear to have joined the BJP and are making their future there. But yes, Shashi will, I hope it does, but I think there will be the awkward moments.
What about Shashi Tharoor and his internal sort of battles within the Congress party, perhaps to gain ascendancy in Kerala?
Yeah, I think that's a more serious issue, really. The point is that I think Shashi somehow has come to the conclusion that the Congress doesn't have much of a future in national politics in the short term. Therefore, if he was to make himself relevant, it would be far better to use his considerable national profile and popularity, and he has a certain cult following of sorts, and use it in Kerala, where there is a decent chance of the Congress beating the left in the next election. So if the Congress was wise, it would use Shashi as a face. But as happens in local politics, there are a lot of entrenched interests. There are people who say, look, we've been slogging in the constituencies for the past 10 years or so and 15 years or so, and we know the sort of grassroots politics. And here is a paratrooper who just comes in and says, on the strength of a sort of glamour quotient, I should do the thing. Now, it's something which the Congress leadership will have to take a call on. I somehow get the feeling they're not going to be very inclined towards Shashi given this particular thing. But even from, there is that perennial conflict which every politician who has a national profile faces in the constituencies, is that the local guys think, oh God, this guy's an interloper. He's just come in and he's trying to grab all the popularity, etc. It's a natural thing. It's nothing unique to Shashi. Shashi is feeling it at the moment.
Do you believe the Congress party has the space within its structure to allow an independent voice like Shashi Tharoor?
Well, all political parties should have an enlarged scope for dissent, and dissent within a certain framework. And that framework should be large and generous and should take into account various little angularities, some of which may be social angularities, some of which may be ideological angularities. I think the richness of the Indian political tradition will come about when political parties become more aggregate parties rather than ideological parties. And this is not a uniquely new formulation of mine. This is something which I borrowed from Mr. Advani and Atal Bihari Vajpayee in the 70s when they used that. How to move away from narrow ideology into becoming a far more of an aggregation of various tendencies. So I think if the BJP, for instance, becomes a more expansive nationalist party and the Congress becomes a more social democratic left of center political, but it'll be good for India. It'll be good for the Indian political tradition.
How do you look at the remarks made by, let's say, Rahul Gandhi when he hit out at the foreign minister for apparently having told Pakistan before our military operations began that we're beginning our military operations? I ask this because on the one hand, you've got the senior leader of the Congress party saying this, and on the other hand, you've got Shashi Tharoor defending Operation Sindoor and explaining why it happened.
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that the leader of opposition, and remember, he is the leader of opposition, that's a constitutional position, that's a very, very important position. And if that person actually strikes a discordant note and becomes a contrarian in a sort of unacceptable sort of way, I think there's wrong. It would suggest that somehow the Indian actions post-Pahalgam were dictated only by party considerations rather than the outpouring of national sentiment, which actually was the case. So I think Rahul Gandhi, it was ill-judged, his position which he's taken. And I think after the position which the Congress took in the Kargil War, if you recall, and you should recall the Kargil War because you were quite active that time. Kargil War, then post that the various things in 2015 and 19, they made awkward noises, but this is going a bit too far, you know. As you can see, most of the people who've joined the delegation, whether it's Anand Sharma, whether it's Manish, I don't know if Ghulam is still in the party or not. But, you know, the point is that there are sensible congressmen, middle of the road, mainstream congressmen, who recognize that there is a time for dissent and there is a time for solidarity.
The entire debate on who in the Congress delegation should have been picked, that's something that obviously didn't go down with the Congress leadership. They felt that, you know, others, and they needed to have a say in that. How do you look at that entire debate?
Well, you know, inevitably a little bit of domestic politics does creep into that thing. You know, like in the Trinamool one, Mr. Yusuf Pathan was unceremoniously dumped, and the favored nephew was taken on board. So they would say that, you know, why have one rule for the Trinamool and one rule for the Congress? So, you know, these are certain, you know, issues which will, but I think there was a certain insistence as far as the government was concerned that people like Manish Tiwari, Shashi Tharoor should actually, and even to the Anand Sharma in South Africa, should be accommodated because they could be effective in that sense. But, you know, in all this thing, in all these debates and all these discussions on who should constitute the delegation, we sometimes need to have a far more critical and a closer look as to what the delegation has achieved and what it should tell us about Indian diplomacy. Did in some way Indian diplomacy lack a political edge which the delegation tried to fill in? These are questions which will come in after we get a complete report of how they fared and what was the response in various countries.
You've said something that I have to ask you. Do you believe that Indian diplomacy has been inadequate in Operation Sindoor, which is why we've had to do this?
The word inadequate is not mine.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that, you know, in dealing with such a complex and sort of headline grabbing incident like the tensions between India and Pakistan, given also the nuclear aspect, which are also there, you need to have traditional diplomacy complemented by what I would call a political approach. Now, that political approach, in my view, sometimes was not there. But I don't expect the normal Indian Foreign Service officers to do that. So there are times when you need to complement that with other things. For instance, do we know that in the European Parliament, the type of solidarity, the support, the consistent support we get for India is provided by the group which is called the far right and is considered a complete untouchable as far as maybe the diplomats are concerned. But they need to be addressed. And now these are political issues which have to be dealt with in a different way. So one size fits all does not always work. That's all I'm saying. It's not a criticism. It's a suggestion that you expand the parameters of diplomacy.
All right. Shobhana, great speaking to you. Thank you very much. It is an interesting situation with Shashi Tharoor. I would suggest there are wheels within wheels, which you probably know about and which we'll have to find out about. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Well, joining us now to give us his sense on Shashi Tharoor and the fact that the Congress party criticizes him, it seems, virtually every day, his own party. I'm not joined now by Rashid Kidwai. Thank you, Mr. Kidwai, very much for being with us. Do you believe that Shashi Tharoor's days in the Congress party are essentially numbered?
Not really, Vishnu. I think Mr. Shashi Tharoor is a very astute politician. He understands Congress dynamics. He has a way with words. So what Shashi Tharoor has said abroad it doesn't cross the Lakshman Rekha of party discipline. You may find him at variance. He fought, after all, the Congress president election. Had he won in September 2023, he would have been Congress president. So just to think of it, the Congress president has become a flag bearer or a cheerleader of Narendra Modi government abroad. So that is something little disturbing. But I think the Congress dynamics are such that there is war of attrition going on. There are a lot of people are acting on behalf of KC Venugopal. We must understand that trouble with Shashi Tharoor is not, his fight with Rahul Gandhi or Mallikarjun Kharge, but with KC Venugopal, who's a AICC General Secretary in charge of organization. Mr. Tharoor, nurses an ambition of becoming, Chief Minister of Kerala. Remember, elections in Kerala are due early next year. Mr. KC Venugopal is also harboring the same ambition. So this is a kind of thing. The background is a battlefield, I would say, is Kerala, and what we are seeing is a war of attrition.
Why is the Congress party not willing to accept the remarks that Shashi Tharoor has made abroad in defense of Operation Sindoor? Is this not something that essentially should be uniting the Congress party with the rest of the country?
So I think the Congress party views it as a political thing. Mr. Tharoor is within his rights to be saying, and most people who are part of that government delegation, 7 government delegations, is saying more or less the same thing. The problem is that it takes 2 to tango. At the domestic front, Vishnu, we are seeing every day, every second day, Prime Minister, none other than Prime Minister Narendra Modi, making a mocking or questioning the Congress nationalist credentials about what happened in 1947, that how the POK could not be, retained with rest of India, and all other things. And you look at the social media campaign by both political parties. So it is, Rahul Gandhi is being described as Jaichand, as Mir Jafar. There was a picture of him being, in Pakistan's now Field Marshal, that Asif Munir's outfit. So all kind of things. The Congress is being compared with, Pakistan's Lashkar-e-Taiba and other militant terrorist outfits. So there is a lot of trust deficit. Now the Congress cannot, as a political party, cannot abandon its political role just because, the 7 delegations are traveling abroad and showcasing India's war against terrorism. And when they are faced with the challenge at the domestic front, they give it back. And that is where I think, Vishnu, this is also a very deft, a very clever move on the part of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and BJP. Because instead of him being answerable to many people, it is the opposition and Congress in particular that has been put on a box, and questions are being asked that why is Congress not being nationalist enough? Why is Congress not towing Shashi Tharoor line, rather than the other way around, that Prime Minister being questioned on his entire handling of diplomacy, I would say.
But how would you respond to those who say that Shashi Tharoor has aligned himself? It's a pragmatic alignment, and one that is geared towards, furthering India's international image. Why should the Congress party be opposed to that?
No, the Congress is not at all opposed to it. The Congress has always extended a hand of friendship. But what I'm saying is there is a kind of, I would say, a dichotomy here, because what is spoken at international forum and what the Prime Minister said in Vadodara, what he said in Ahmedabad, what he said elsewhere, is something that hurts, the Congress. You cannot be belittling Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi and get away with it. So therefore, the Congress has a right to reply, right to respond. And what Mr. Tharoor is doing, and this is something that is not understood by, let's say, a television viewer or a common man, because they want to see, like me and you as citizens, we want to see a united face of the country. But this is a ploy. Actually, the entire idea of sending this, the 7 delegations and all is aimed at domestic politics also. Because, Vishnu, as we know that there is going to be parliament session, special session on emergency, perhaps in mid-June. And of course, there is a winter session, monsoon session next month in July, where actually the Prime Minister will have a constituency in both houses of parliament within the opposition ranks to, support him on what happened with Pakistan, or with the war against terror. And therefore, the Congress and opposition is in a very weak wicket. And therefore, Mr. Tharoor is more like I would say, as a pawn that is being used, and that's the Congress perception of it. Tharoor also, you see, he's 69-year-old. He is fancying his chances as the next chief ministerial candidate in Kerala, and Congress leadership, a section of it, is not letting it happen. So he also faces a very bleak future. It's very easy, Vishnu, to say that Mr. Tharoor would switch side and all. It's not an easy thing, temperamentally and otherwise. There is no third front. If Tharoor joins Trinamool and all, it comes to a knot in a state like Kerala. If he joins BJP, what will be his role? We already know what happened to Ghulam Nabi Azad. We also know what happened to Captain Amrinder Singh. They were towering leaders of the Congress, but with the other side, they're not taken for them.
Okay. All right. So interesting choices that the Congress party obviously has to look at very closely. But I think many would really be looking at what Shashi Tharoor is doing from a larger perspective as well, and whether his future genuinely does still lie in the Congress party. We'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, it's about him. But there may be wheels within wheels here. I think Rashid Bhai would agree. We'll leave it over there. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks.